Marcus Webb was 41 years old when his wife pressed two folded $20 bills into his palm, told him it was more than he deserved, and watched from the front step as he loaded everything he owned into the back of a borrowed Honda Accord. For 9 years, Damon Reeves had been a quiet husband and the kind of software architect who built back-end infrastructure that entire companies ran on without anyone knowing his name. He drove a 2015 Civic with a crack in the dashboard he'd taped over with electrical tape. He wore the same 4 work shirts on rotation. He made his wife Vanessa's lunch 3 times a week because she never made her own. He had spent 6 years building a data compression engine in his spare time. Nights, weekends, lunch breaks. Every hour she was out with friends who found him boring. A piece of technology that 3 enterprise companies had already tried to license and that he had quietly declined because he was waiting for the right moment. She had no idea the man she handed $40 and told to start over was carrying something worth $600 million in an encrypted folder on a laptop he packed into a grocery bag. What happened next would cost Vanessa everything she thought she was leaving behind. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from, and subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The alarm went off at 5:14 a.m. on a Tuesday in March, and Damon had already been awake for 40 minutes. He lay in the dark listening to the specific silence of the apartment, the ventilation hum through the walls, the distant sound of a truck on the street 2 floors down, the nothing sound of a Tuesday before the world started. He reached over and killed the alarm before the second pulse. He had done that for 11 years. His body did not need the alarm. He set it out of habit. The way he documented things out of habit. The way he checked his work twice out of habit. The habits were the structure. The structure was the thing. He dressed quietly. Dark jeans, gray shirt, the same worn-in sneakers he wore to the co-working space on Chestnut Street where he rented a desk 3 days a week. He went to the kitchen and made coffee, black, no sugar, the way he had always made it, and stood at the counter while it brewed, and opened his laptop and checked the build logs from the overnight run. The compression ratios were holding. They had been holding for 4 months now, consistently, across every test dataset he threw at them. The engine was not a concept anymore. It was a product. It had been a product for some time, and the only question left was what he was going to do with it. He heard Vanessa's alarm go off in the bedroom. He heard her silence it. He heard the particular quality of her stillness that told him she was not going back to sleep. She was lying in bed on her phone. He could set a clock by her mornings. He had been setting a clock by them for 9 years. He poured his coffee. He sat at the kitchen table. He opened the development log and made his first notes of the day. He did not think about what he would have for breakfast. He did not think about whether Vanessa would come out before she left. He thought about compression ratios and latency improvements and the very specific problem he had been working on for 3 weeks in the file transfer handshake that was adding 11 milliseconds to the cycle time that he had not yet eliminated. The kitchen was quiet. The coffee was hot. The screen was bright in the dark apartment, and the numbers were doing what he told them to do. He was, in the way that mattered most to him, entirely at home. She came out at 7:15, already dressed, already composed, already somewhere else in the particular way she had been somewhere else for most of the past 2 years. Vanessa worked in client relations for a commercial real estate firm downtown. She wore it well, the clothes, the posture, the ease she moved through rooms with. She was very good at her work. Damon had always admired that about her, even now, even when the thing between them had gone quiet and careful in the way that things go quiet and careful before something ends. She poured herself coffee without speaking. She stood at the counter with her back to him and looked at her phone. "Morning," he said. Morning, he waited for what came next, which was nothing. She finished her coffee, set the mug in the sink without rinsing it, and picked up her bag. She paused at the kitchen door. "I'm going to be late tonight," she said. "Don't wait up." "I never wait up," he said. She looked at him briefly. Something moved across her face, not guilt, not exactly, more like a calculation she was running that he was not party to. Then she left. He listened to the door close. He got up and rinsed her mug. He dried his hands on the dish towel hanging from the oven handle. He went back to his laptop and opened the handshake code and looked at it for a long time before he found the 11 milliseconds and knew exactly where they were hiding. The object appeared in early November, 9 months before the $40. Not an object. A change. The change was in her phone. She had always left it on the kitchen counter when she was home. He had never looked at it, and she had never thought to guard it, because there was nothing to guard, and he was not the kind of man who looked. Then one Tuesday she left work early, a thing she never did, and he heard her come in while he was at his desk, and when he came to the kitchen, she was standing with her phone screen down on the counter, and she smiled at him in the particular way of someone who has just put something away. He did not say anything. He made dinner. He ate with her. He washed the dishes. He started noticing after that. The phone went face down when he entered a room. She angled away from him when she was looking at it. She laughed at something on it one evening, a real laugh, bright and sudden. And when he looked up, she had already composed her face back to neutral. He filed all of it the way he filed anomalies in the code, noted, stored, not acted on until the pattern was complete enough to understand. The pattern completed itself on a Saturday in January when he came home from the co-working space and found her on the phone in the bedroom with the door closed, and heard, through the door, her voice at a register he had not heard her use with him in 2 years. He stood in the hallway and listened. He could not make out words. He did not need to. He went to the kitchen. He made coffee. He sat at the table with his laptop open and his coffee getting cold, and he looked at the compression engine code for 2 hours, without changing a single line. She told him she wanted a divorce on a Sunday morning in the middle of February, while he was making breakfast. He had known it was coming. He had known it for months in the way you know a structural failure is coming when you see the early signs, the way the load is shifting, the way the supporting elements are no longer distributing weight the way they were designed to. You don't need the collapse to confirm what the signs already told you. He turned off the burner. He turned around. He looked at her. She was standing in the kitchen doorway with her arms crossed in the way she stood when she had decided something and was delivering the decision rather than discussing it. She had practiced this moment. He could tell by the quality of her stillness. "I think we both know this isn't working," she said. He was quiet for a moment. "Okay, I've already spoken to an attorney." "Okay," she looked at him. "You're not going to say anything?" "What would you like me to say?" She uncrossed her arms. Something in her composure shifted, not softened, recalibrated. "I think it would be better if you found somewhere else to stay while we work out the details. We can talk about the apartment." The apartment was in her name. She had lived there before they married. He had moved in. They had never changed the lease. "How long do I have?" he said. "I think sooner is better." "A week?" He nodded. He turned the burner back on. He finished making breakfast. She stood in the doorway for another moment, and then she left. He ate his eggs alone at the kitchen table with his laptop open. He looked at the code. He found a clean solution to a secondary problem he had been circling for a week. He wrote it down in his development notebook. Black cover, graph paper, the kind he had used since graduate school. He had 7 days to find an apartment. He started looking that afternoon. He found a room in a shared apartment in West Philadelphia, 2 miles away, available the 1st of March. The room had a window, a closet, and enough space for his desk and his bed. The kitchen was shared. The bathroom was shared. The rent was $640 a month. He paid first and last from his personal account, which had $22,000 in it, which he had saved in 8 years of quiet living on a software consultant's day rate, while Vanessa's salary covered their shared expenses. He did not tell her about the savings. She did not ask. He spent the week packing methodically, his desk, his monitors, his notebooks, 11 of them, graph paper, chronological, the full development history of everything he had built over 6 years, his clothes, his books. 3 kitchen items he had brought into the marriage: a cast-iron skillet, a coffee grinder, and a chef's knife his father had given him. On the last morning, a Sunday, he carried the final boxes to the borrowed Honda and came back up for the last time. Vanessa was in the kitchen. She was dressed. She was composed. She held out her hand, and in it were 2 folded $20 bills. He looked at them. "For the cab," she said. "If you need it." He looked at her face. She was not being cruel. That was the thing he would remember later. She was not performing cruelty. She had simply arrived at a place where $40 was a reasonable parting gesture for 9 years, and she genuinely believed that, and there was no malice in it, only a kind of complete and total miscalculation of the man standing in front of her. He took the $40. He put them in his jacket pocket. He picked up the last box. "Take care of yourself," he said. He went down the stairs. He loaded the box. He drove to West Philadelphia. He went inside. He made coffee. He set up his desk. He opened the laptop. He got back to work. His friend Kwame had been the first person he called. Not for the reaction. Damon didn't need the reaction, but because Kwame was the person who had introduced him to Vanessa at a rooftop party 7 years ago, and Kwame was owed the information. They sat in Kwame's kitchen on a Wednesday evening, and Damon told him everything, start to finish. The phone, the Sunday morning, the $40, the room in West Philadelphia. Kwame listened to all of it without interrupting. When Damon finished, Kwame was quiet for a long time. Then he said, $40. $40, Damon confirmed. "Brother?" Kwame shook his head slowly. "Brother, I'm fine," Damon said. "I know you're fine. That's what worries me. You should be angry." "I'm extremely angry," Damon said. "I'm just deciding where it goes." Kwame looked at him for a long moment. "The engine," he said. He said it the way he always said it, with the particular weight of someone who had watched something built from nothing and knew exactly what it was worth. "You're going to do something with the engine." "Yes." "When?" Damon picked up his coffee. "When it's ready." The room in West Philadelphia was 12 by 14 feet and had good north-facing light. He refinished the desk himself. An old door on sawhorses that the previous tenant had left, sanded flat and treated, and exactly the right height. He built 2 shelves from boards he found at a salvage yard on Baltimore Avenue, cut to size with a handsaw, mounted with the same precision he applied to everything structural. He put his 11 notebooks on the shelves in order. He put his books next to them. He set up both monitors and his external drive and the quiet mechanical keyboard he had used for 6 years. He bought a coffee grinder and a decent bag of beans. He bought a cast-iron pan from a thrift store on Baltimore and seasoned it himself over 3 evenings. The room was 12 by 14 feet, and it was entirely his, and it was enough. He worked 16-hour days through March and April. He was not working to escape. He was working because the engine was almost finished, and he could feel it the way you feel a proof closing. The way the last constraints fall away and what remains is clear and complete, and exactly what you knew was there. He eliminated the 11-millisecond latency problem in the first week of April. He ran the full benchmark suite against every enterprise competitor on the market. The results came back, and he sat with them for a long time, and then he closed the laptop and made coffee, and stood at the window and looked at the street below for 10 minutes without thinking about anything at all. Then he opened the laptop again and sent an email to 3 people. The first was a man named Arthur Layton, a technology attorney in New York who specialized in IP licensing and acquisition. Damon had found him 3 years earlier when he first began understanding what the engine might be worth, and had maintained the relationship with quarterly check-ins. Arthur knew the engine. Arthur had reviewed the patent filings. Arthur had said, the last time they spoke, "When you're ready, give me 2 weeks and we'll run a process." The email said, "I'm ready. Let's run the process." The second was a former colleague named Priya Nair, who had left Enterprise Software to become a principal at a mid-size VC firm in San Francisco. She had seen an early version of the engine 2 years prior and had said, "Call me when it's production ready." The email said, "It's ready." The third was a man named Gerald Webb, no relation to anyone, just a name, who ran a boutique M&A advisory in Philadelphia, and whom Arthur had recommended for the buy-side process if they went that direction. He sent all 3 emails at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in early May from his desk in the 12 by 14 room, with a cup of coffee at his right hand and 11 notebooks of development history on the shelf behind him. Then he went for a walk. He bought a bag of groceries. He came home and made breakfast. By noon, all 3 had replied. Arthur's process began in June. It was a structured sale process, controlled, documented, sequenced. Arthur had run 43 of them, and he ran this one the same way. Data room first, then initial outreach to a curated list of strategic buyers, then NDAs, then management presentations, then binding bids. He explained it to Damon over the phone the day they engaged, walking through each stage with the precision of someone who understood that the discipline of the process was what protected the value. "You don't talk numbers to anyone outside this process," Arthur said. "You don't confirm interest. You don't deny interest. You say nothing." "I never say much," Damon said. "Good," Arthur said. "Keep it that way." The data room went live in mid-June. By the end of the month, 11 companies had signed NDAs. By mid-July, 8 had submitted initial indications of interest. By early August, 4 had advanced to the management presentation stage, and the binding bid deadline was set for the first Friday of September. Damon gave the management presentations himself. Arthur prepared him and sat beside him, but the technology was Damon's and no one could explain it the way he could, not because he performed expertise, but because he had spent 6 years building it at a desk in a borrowed room, and when he described what it did and how it did it, the description had the specific authority of someone who had made every single decision himself. He wore the same gray shirt he wore to the co-working space. He brought his coffee in a thermos. In the third presentation, the lead technical evaluator from one of the bidders, a man with a Stanford PhD and 15 years in enterprise infrastructure, stopped Damon midway through the latency demonstration and said, "You built this yourself?" "Yes," Damon said. The man was quiet for a moment. "How long?" 6 years. The man looked at the benchmark results on the screen. "This is the best compression architecture I've seen in a decade. And I have seen everything." Damon picked up his thermos. "I know," he said. The binding bids came in on the first Friday of September. Arthur called Damon at 4:30 that afternoon. Damon was at his desk in West Philadelphia. He had been working on a secondary project, a smaller compression application he had spun off from the engine's core code base, something he had been building quietly for 8 months, the kind of work he did with the hours that other people spent watching television. 3 bids, Arthur said. 1 below the floor, 2 above. He named the numbers. Damon was quiet. The high bid, Arthur said, is from Verixa Systems. They have a board meeting Monday. If they approve, they want to execute within 30 days. Damon looked at his notebook. He had a page in it from the first year of building the engine, a page where he had written down what he thought the technology might be worth, if he was right about everything, if the ratios held and the latency targets were achievable and the patent claims were defensible. He had written a number on that page. He had not looked at the number since. He had not needed to. The high bid from Verixa was not the number he had written. It was higher. "Tell me about the approval process," Damon said. Arthur told him. Damon listened. He made 4 notes. He asked 3 questions. He thanked Arthur and hung up. He sat at his desk in the 12 by 14 room with the north-facing light and the 11 notebooks on the shelf and the cast-iron skillet in the kitchen that he had seasoned himself over 3 evenings in March. He opened his development notebook. He turned to a clean page. He wrote the date. He went back to work on the secondary project. The Verixa board approved on Monday. The deal closed 31 days later in a conference room on the 32nd floor of a building on Market Street, 3 blocks from where Vanessa worked. It was a $600 million acquisition. Damon sat at the table with Arthur on one side and Gerald Webb on the other and signed 17 documents in a specific sequence that Arthur had walked him through twice. The room had floor-to-ceiling windows and pale wood paneling, and the ventilation system ran very quietly through the walls. Outside the windows, the city was doing what it always did. Traffic, pedestrians, the flat October light on the buildings. He signed each document at the line Arthur indicated. He did not rush. He read every page. When the last document was signed, the Verixa General Counsel shook his hand and said, "Mr. Reeves, this is a remarkable piece of technology." "Thank you," Damon said. "I put some time into it." Cuomo found out from the press release. Verixa issued it at 7 a.m. on the Wednesday after closing. Standard acquisition announcement. Damon's name in the 3rd paragraph, the deal value in the headline. Kwame called at 7:04. $600 million, Kwame said. $600 million, Damon confirmed. He was in the kitchen making coffee. "You built that in a spare room. I built most of it before that. The spare room was just the finishing." Kwame was quiet for a moment. "Then she gave you $40. She did." "Damon, I know. Are you going to call her?" He thought about it. "Not for long." "No," he said. "There's nothing I need from that conversation." Kwame laughed, the kind of laugh that meant he understood. "So what now? I'm working on something new," Damon said. "I've been building it for 8 months. It's interesting." "Of course you are," Kwame said. "Of course you have been." He heard about Vanessa through a mutual friend named Sandra 3 months after the press release. She had seen the announcement. Everyone who knew either of them had seen the announcement. Sandra relayed the information with the particular careful neutrality of someone delivering something they weren't entirely sure they should be delivering. Vanessa had seen Damon's name in the headline, had read the full release, had sat with it for a long time, had called Sandra that evening and said almost nothing for most of the conversation, and then near the end had said, "I didn't know." What didn't she know? Sandra said she had asked. Vanessa had been quiet for a moment. "Any of it," she said. She had called the man she had left Damon for, a commercial real estate agent named Troy she had been involved with for 8 months before the divorce, and they had met for dinner, and she had tried to explain something she could not quite name. Troy had been patient, and then less patient. He was not interested in a long conversation about an ex-husband's business deal. He had his own listings. He had his own life. They had broken up 6 weeks later. Damon heard all of this from Sandra on a Thursday afternoon and thanked her for telling him, and went back to the secondary project he was building. He felt the information the way you feel a structural calculation you already knew confirming itself. He did not feel triumphant. He did not feel vindicated in the way that required another person's presence. He felt the clean satisfaction of a proof that had always been sound, finally becoming visible to everyone in the room. He made a note in his development log. He got back to work. He bought a house in March, not a large house. A 1920s row home in West Philadelphia, 3 blocks from the room he had rented, a house that had been neglected and that needed work. Original hardwood floors under 60 years of linoleum, plaster walls with hairline cracks, a kitchen that had not been updated in 3 decades. He bought it because he wanted a project. He bought it because he had his father's patience and his own precision, and the kind of hands that found rest in making something that had been damaged into something that would last. He refinished the floors himself over 2 weekends. He replastered the dining room walls. He built custom shelving in the study from walnut boards he found at a sawmill in New Jersey, measured twice, cut once, mounted level to the 1/4 inch. He put his 12 notebooks on the shelves. He put his books next to them. He hung his cast-iron skillet on a hook in the kitchen above the stove. The coffee grinder went on the counter by the window. He made coffee every morning at 5:14 and drank it at the kitchen table with his laptop open and his notebook beside it, and the light coming in gray at first, and then pale, and then the flat bright of a Philadelphia morning. He was not performing a new life. He was constructing one, piece by piece, with his hands, with patience, with the same precision that had always been who he was. He ran into Vanessa once. It was a Saturday in April, 11 months after the close. He was at the salvage yard on Baltimore Avenue, looking at reclaimed brick for a garden wall he was planning, moving through the yard with the unhurried attention he brought to everything material, looking for the right kind of uniform wear in the clay that told him the bricks were old enough and stable enough. She was at the front counter buying something. He saw her when he came around a rack of architectural salvage. She saw him at the same moment. They were 15 feet apart. Neither of them moved for a moment. She looked different, not diminished, not visibly altered, but something in her bearing had changed in the way that things change when a certainty you built your life on turns out to have been a picture rather than a fact. She was holding a small bag. She was wearing the coat she'd had since before they married. He waited. "Damon," she said. "Vanessa." She looked at him. He had the sense she was deciding whether to say something she had been carrying. "I saw the announcement," she said. "I read about it." "Okay," he said. "I didn't know," she said. "About the engine. About any of it." He looked at her steadily. "I know," he said. "You never asked." She was quiet. He was not angry in the way that required something from her. He was not performing distance. He was simply standing in a salvage yard on a Saturday morning, on his way back to a house he was building with his own hands, and there was nothing she could give him, and nothing he needed from her, and that was not a wound anymore. It was just the true shape of the thing. "Take care of yourself," he said. He turned back to the bricks. He found 4 stacks of the right kind, uniform and old, with a specific clay red that meant they had been fired correctly and would hold weather for another 100 years. He made a note of the quantity. He found the yard manager and arranged delivery. He drove home. He made coffee. He opened his notebook to a clean page. He picked up his pen. The secondary project was close. He could feel it the way he always felt a proof closing, the last constraints falling away. What remained clear and complete, and exactly what he knew was there all along. He got to work. He did not look back. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.